Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to our channel. Today, we have a thrilling tale set on the frozen moon of Jovara, where one fateful act of compassion changes the course of an entire world. Without spoiling too much, let's just say that near the very end, a powerful meltdown threatens to flood vast ice caverns, an event that will leave you gasping. Wondering how our brave heroes trigger and survive this dramatic turn of events? You'll have to listen to the complete story to discover all the twists, sacrifices, and ultimate fate of this icy moon. If you enjoy stories filled with suspense, heartfelt bonds, and the fight against impossible odds, this adventure is for you. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on more exciting, action-packed narratives in the future. And don't hesitate to leave a comment below on your personal thoughts. Tell us where you're tuning in from and what you're expecting before hearing the full story. Jovara was a realm of eternal frost, a moon locked in frigid twilight as it orbited its gas giant parent. Anyone foolish or desperate enough to live on its surface quickly learned that the bitter cold was the least of their worries. The real enemy lurked among them in the form of greed. On Jovara, water existed mostly as ice, thick expanses that stretched across the moon's vast plains, mountainous glaciers that towered over settlements. Yet, for all its apparent abundance, liquid water was far more precious than any gem in the galaxy. With the moon's atmosphere nearly too thin to trap significant heat, large-scale melting was nearly impossible without specialized heaters, refineries, and artificially constructed habitats. Those who controlled these technical marvels, known as heat domes or thermostations, lived like kings, reaping fortunes from the necessity of water rationing. Among these kings stood Baron Gelthus, whose personal domain encompassed the largest thermostation on Jovara. Through an ever-expanding network of mercenaries, he enforced harsh laws that sentenced anyone who dared steal even a handful of ice shards for personal use. The penalty for theft of water was swift, brutal, and designed to instill dread, the severing of one's hand. But on the outskirts of Gelthus's domain, hope still flickered in the hearts of those who yearned for a just world. In desolate colonies on the edge of the ice flats, whispers grew of hidden aquifers, advanced geothermal pockets, or ancient technology from lost civilizations deep beneath the ice, sources of water that, if discovered, could reshape Jovara's oppressive power structures. In the midst of this moon's treacherous landscape, we find Orxia, a lean young woman with translucent greenish skin adapted to the sub-zero climate. She was one of the so-called ice people, rumored to possess an uncanny ability to sense the presence of water locked deep in the planet's frozen crust. Her father, once revered as an ice finder, had grown ill. Without proper water and heat, he would soon die. Only a miracle or a crime would save him now. Orxia felt the cold before she felt the fear. It seeped through the thin seams in her patched-up thermal suit, gnawing at her bones. She trudged across the hushed expanse of whiteness, her boots crunching the hard surface. The sun's pale rays barely touched the horizon. Jovara's weak daylight was akin to eternal dusk. In the distance stood the battered cluster of metal huts and tents that formed the settlement known as Greyhold, her home. Her father lay somewhere in that maze of corrugated steel, coughing away his final days. His affliction had grown worse each month, a creeping frost that coated his lungs. A heat infusion or a steady supply of properly melted, purified water might have prolonged his life, but their meager family funds had run dry. Baron Gelthus's outpost near Greyhold was rumored to have a large stockpile of refined water containers, metal flasks that the local population could purchase at extortionate prices. Orxia had no illusions about the punishment for Rome theft. She knew it as well as anyone. Yet her father's sunken eyes haunted her, and she decided that if the law demanded a hand for a flask, so be it. She could not stand idly by while the man who raised her froze from the inside out. Step by step, she approached the outpost. An imposing guard tower protruded from a ring of barbed fencing. Closer to the tower stood a cluster of large, black metal crates. Inside them were the sealed canisters of water. A single guard, a thick-set Jovaran man wrapped in heavy furs, stood vigil. His weapon, a conduction lance, crackled with arcs of superheated energy at the tip. Her breath caught in her throat. If she moved wrong or the guard spotted her, her life might be forfeited on the spot. Yet the alternative, doing nothing, was unimaginable. She crouched behind a broken piece of machinery half buried in the snow. Timing her stealth to the guard's slow pacing, she lunged forward on silent feet, closing the distance to the crates. The steel surface was numbingly cold under her fingertips. Her heart pounded as she tried to open a latch. It clicked open with a metal clang that rang through the still air, and she froze. A heavy silence pressed down on her. Had the guard heard? She waited, heart pounding, ears straining. Moments later, the guard's footsteps resumed a bored rhythm. She exhaled shakily. Carefully, she lifted the lid and slid out a compact water canister. Even wearing gloves, she felt the chill radiating from within the container. Just one flask. Just enough to keep father alive until tomorrow. The thought gave her a burst of resolve. She secured the flask against her torso, hoping her body heat wouldn't freeze the lock mechanism or set off any hidden sensor. Then she set the lid back into place and began creeping away. Halfway back to her hiding spot, a blinding light swept across her path. The guard had turned on a handheld spotlight. She dropped down low, pressing herself against the shadow of a supply crate. The beam passed overhead, illuminating swirling flakes of ice in the darkness. Orxia felt her heart hammering. Another 2 seconds, and the beam moved on. She made a run for it. All sense of caution gone, she dashed across the open ground. The snow crunched, perhaps too loudly. A shout broke the silence, and the swirl of the spotlight returned. She did not stop. She sprinted across the open ground, ignoring the burn in her calves, ignoring the fact that she was entirely exposed. Abruptly, someone slammed into her from the side, tackling her to the ground. She landed hard on her shoulder, the water flask slipping from her coat and tumbling onto the snow. She scrabbled to retrieve it, but a gloved hand seized her wrist in a crushing grip. She twisted, peering up into the guard's face. He was a brutish Jovaran with a scar slicing across a pale cheek. "Well, well," the guard growled. "Caught red-handed, or shall we say ice-handed?" He pressed an emergency call button on his belt. "We have a water thief at the outpost," he said into a transmitter, voice harsh with disgust. "Bring the enforcers." Orxia tried to jerk free, but he twisted her wrist, sending paralyzing pain all the way to her shoulder. The metal canister lay a foot away in the snow. She clenched her jaw. "Please," she rasped, fighting back tears. "I needed it for my father. He's dying." "So is everyone here," the guard sneered. "But you stole from the Baron, and you know the law." He forced her to her feet, keeping her wrist twisted behind her. She bit back a cry of agony, feeling the joints of her fingers and elbows strain. He marched her toward a small clearing near the fence, where he'd presumably wait for backup. The guard's conduction lance hummed ominously at his side. "Saw you scuttling in the shadows," he went on. "Thought you could slip away unnoticed? Foolish." Orxia's mind raced. Her father was alone in a freezing shack, waiting for her return. If she lost a hand, or worse, never came home at all, no, I can't let that happen. She cast about for some method of escape, but they'd already left the outpost gate, and the guard's hold was too tight. Breaking free seemed impossible. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the frosty darkness, resonant and strangely calm. "That's enough. Let her go." Orxia and the guard both turned to see a figure emerging from behind a battered cargo sled. The newcomer was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn but functional thermal jacket. His face was partially obscured by a cowl or thick scarf. "This is none of your concern," the guard spat, leveling his lance. "Stay back if you know what's good for you." The stranger stepped closer, hands raised to show he wasn't holding a weapon, at least not openly. "I'm making it my concern." His voice had a mild accent that Orxia couldn't place. "I'll pay for what she took. Double the kist if that's acceptable." A bitter laugh escaped the guard's lips. "Double? She was about to steal it. So it's not just the kid, it's the principle and the law." The law, that single phrase froze Orxia's blood more thoroughly than any gust of cold wind. Everyone on Jovara knew that law was brutal. To steal water, no matter the reason, meant forfeiting a limb. But the stranger's posture showed no sign of backing down. "Then consider the principle solved with triple payment." He reached into a pouch at his belt, pulling out a small cylindrical device Orxia recognized as a universal credit token. He tossed it lightly to the guard, who caught it in one hand. Blinking in confusion, the guard lowered his conduction lance slightly to inspect the device. Orxia's heart pounded. Was this the moment to run? The guard made a derisive sound. Triple, you say, enough for me, maybe, but not enough for your friend to avoid punishment. I have strict orders from the Baron's enforcers. Thieves lose their hands. The stranger's eyes narrowed. Then how much to buy out that portion of the law? His voice sharpened, layering challenge with quiet anger. Surely everything has a price here. Orxia noticed the guard's expression flicker. Greed momentarily warred with fanatic loyalty. Then he set his jaw. I can't overrule the Baron's codes. The guard moved, jabbing Orxia's pinned wrist forward. She felt a searing sting as the conduction lance's aura licked against her forearm. She cried out, "Let her go!" Each word from the stranger was weighted with quiet fury. The guard barely had time to turn. In a flash, the stranger lunged, disarming the conduction lance with a fluid twist. The device clattered to the ground, spitting sparks. Orxia stumbled free. Freed from the guard's crushing grip, she collapsed against the snow, cradling her scorched arm. The guard snarled and swung a heavy punch, but the stranger ducked. Before the guard could recover, the stranger slammed a palm into the man's chest, sending him sprawling backward onto the ground. He groaned, stunned. Breath steaming in the frigid air, the stranger scooped up the conduction lance and powered it down. Then he turned to Orxia, extending a hand. She hesitated, still trembling, but something in his eyes radiated sincerity. Gently, she took his offered hand and let him help her up. Who are you, woman?" she managed. He gave a half smile. Name's Logan. Let's get you somewhere warmer. Footsteps sounded nearby, multiple pairs. Through the fence came a group of enforcers, each carrying some variant of a conduction lance or heated baton. The guard on the ground raised a shout, pointing at the pair. Logan's gaze darted around. Too many to fight, he murmured grimly. We need to run. He took Orxia's elbow. She clutched the water flask to her chest and followed him, her mind reeling from pain and exhaustion. They dashed along the chain-link fence until they found a gap near a collapsed section of barbed wire. Through swirling flakes of icy wind, they slipped away into Jovara's endless night. They ran until Orxia's lungs burned, and every muscle in her legs felt like iron. Finally, Logan led them behind a thick outcrop of ice-encrusted rock. Once shielded from the howling wind, he spun around and placed a finger to his lips. They crouched together in the dim starlight, listening for pursuit. Distant shouts faded. The hush of Jovara's bleak landscape settled in. After a long moment, Orxia exhaled shakily. I can't believe I'm not dead, she whispered. Logan gave a quick nod, scanning their surroundings. You're welcome. Now, can you stand on your own? Let me see your arm. She realized she was still leaning heavily on his shoulder. Reluctantly, she straightened, showing him the raw scorch mark near her wrist. The conduction lance had only lightly grazed her, but it left a burn. Logan winced. I'm no medic, but we should clean that. Otherwise, in these conditions, infection sets in fast. He shrugged off a small pack from beneath his thermal jacket, rummaging until he found a metal cylinder. Pressing a button, he popped the lid open and retrieved a small, sterile cloth, which he drizzled with antiseptic from a tube. Orxia inhaled sharply as he dabbed at the wound. The pain was sharp, but she forced herself to hold still. Up close, she could make out the angular set of his jaw, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, and the tan skin, unusual for someone living in a place with so little sunlight. When he finished, she mumbled a thank you. He nodded. I suppose you had a good reason for going after that canister. My father, she said, hugging the flask protectively. He's deathly ill. If I don't get him water, properly thawed, purified water, he'll never last the week. Logan studied her for a moment, then sighed. All right, let's get him that water. Where do you live? She blinked in confusion at his willingness to help, but she had little choice but to trust him. Greyhold Settlement, about half an hour's walk from here if we keep the cliff face to our right. Logan hoisted his pack. Lead on. The trek was arduous. The lunar wind scoured them with bursts of frost crystals, and the ground was uneven with cracks of ice that threatened to swallow a careless foot. Yet Logan's presence gave Orxia an unexpected surge of courage. No one had ever intervened on her behalf like that, let alone risk their life or pay money to save her from punishment. Glancing at him, she asked, "So you're not from here?" He gave a wry chuckle. "Is it that obvious? I'm an off-worlder, ex-military. I do freelance work now. Security consulting, sometimes rescue missions in places where there's trouble." "Jovara has plenty of trouble," he nodded. "Hence my presence." Then after a moment's pause, he added, "I've heard about Baron Gelthus's water monopoly. Not the first time I've run across an oppressive system built around controlling vital resources." She studied his profile. "You speak as though you've dismantled such systems before." "Maybe once or twice," he said, managing a faint smile. Before she could ask more, she spotted the faint glow of rudimentary heaters emanating from the cluster of ramshackle shelters that constituted Greyhold. It was a pitiful outpost of rusted metal, patched tarps, and scraps of advanced technology left over from better days. The people here were determined, though. That determination had kept them alive in Jovara's merciless environment. They approached the structure where Orxia and her father lived, a squat rectangular building half buried in ice. She pressed a code into the door panel, which hissed open, letting out a gust of relatively warmer air. Inside was little more than a single cramped room with a battered bunk and a crude heater in the corner. On the bunk lay her father, motionless beneath layers of tattered blankets. "Father," she said breathlessly, hurrying to his side. "I've brought water." The man stirred, opening eyes the same pale green as Orxia's. His cheeks were sunken, and each breath rattled in his chest. He had once been tall and imposing, but now he looked frail, reduced by sickness. Logan quietly shut the door behind them, giving the place a quick inspection. He walked over to a small heater plate in the corner and set it to medium power, then rummaged for a container in which to melt and purify the ice canister. He found a metal pot caked with frost. Orxia carefully opened the canister, emptying some of the frozen chunks into the pot. Logan turned on the heater plate, using a portable purifier from his pack to ensure any meltdown wouldn't carry contaminants. Steam began to rise, thin and wispy, filling the shack with a faint hiss. The father's eyes flickered from Orxia to Logan and back. "Who is this?" he rasped. She swallowed. "His name is Logan. He, saved me from a guard." Logan knelt beside the bunk, giving a polite nod. "You must be Orxia's father. Let's get you warm." The older man attempted a faint smile. "Warm? That would be nice." Orxia lifted him slightly, helping him sip from a small cup that Logan filled with the freshly purified water. The father's face contorted in relief, as if that single swallow had momentarily eased his agony. While he drank, Logan discreetly checked the older man's vitals with a handheld scanner. Orxia watched with a pang of hope and anxiety. "Is he salvageable?" she ventured, voice trembling. Logan's gaze flicked to hers, sympathy evident. "He needs proper medical attention, more advanced than what I can do here. But if he gets enough fluids in warmer conditions, he might improve." She closed her eyes, relief mingling with fear. She had the water for now, but tomorrow, next week, that single flask wouldn't last long. Baron Gelthus's men would be on alert after the theft. As if reading her mind, Logan spoke softly. "We can't stay. If the Baron's enforcers come looking, this place will be the first they search." "But my father can barely walk." Logan exhaled. "I've got a small transport ship parked a good distance from here, beyond the ravine. It has a med bay, not the best, but better than nothing." A flutter of hope rose in Orxia's chest. "You'd take us there?" His gaze was steady. "Yes, but if we do this, we'll be provoking the Baron. By harboring you, I become a criminal too. You understand that, right?" She nodded, heart pounding. "I can't ask you to risk your life more than you already have." He gave a crooked smile. "I wouldn't have stepped in back there if I was afraid of risking my life. Let's get your father ready." It took them nearly half an hour to gather the few possessions they had. Orxia's father alternated between bouts of coughing and feverish muttering. She bundled him in every blanket and scrap of cloth available. Logan helped, supporting the older man's weight with a gentle, practiced manner that hinted at medical or rescue training. Outside, the bitter cold greeted them like a slap. Orxia worried her father wouldn't survive the journey, but Logan insisted that the only chance lay in reaching his ship. They set out, forging a path across drifts of snow lit by the moon's faint daylight. The father shivered uncontrollably, and Orxia clutched his arm, whispering encouragement. She stole occasional glances at Logan, at the tight line of his jaw as he surveyed the surroundings, scanning for threats. Though exhausted and frightened, she couldn't help feeling a spark of gratitude and curiosity about this mysterious off-worlder who had come to Jovara. An hour later, they crested a small ridge, revealing a ravine below. Orxia's breath hitched as she spied a vessel nestled among the icy crags. It was a sleek starship, shaped somewhat like a dagger, with visible patchwork plating on the hull. A faint blue glow emanated from undercarriage thrusters, indicating minimal power was engaged. "That's yours," Orxia asked, impressed. Logan nodded. "The Sun Dancer. She's had better days, but she'll fly mine. It was a scrap ship I salvaged, then retrofitted over the years." Orxia frowned. "Won't the Baron or his men track you here?" "Possibly, but I've masked my landing signature. They'd have to search systematically. We'll have to hope they have bigger concerns." They descended the ridge carefully, half carrying Orxia's father. At the base of the ravine, an access ramp lowered with a hiss, revealing a warmly lit interior. The wave of heat that rushed out made Orxia's eyes sting in relief. The father groaned faintly, half conscious. Logan ushered them inside, tapping a control panel to seal the hatch behind them. The interior was modest, but clearly customized. A corridor led to a small common area from which branched off a cockpit and a cramped med bay. The ship hummed with life support systems. Logan guided the older man to a metal bed in the med bay, hooking him up to an IV drip. A small overhead scanner flickered, reading vitals. Logan monitored the readout. "He's severely dehydrated, and that lung infection is advanced, but I think we can stabilize him." Orxia hovered at the doorway, her gaze darting around anxiously. Finally, she swallowed. "Thank you again. I don't know how to repay you, especially if you're risking the Baron's wrath." He gave her a sidelong look. "Let's say I have personal reasons, and I've dealt with barons of all kinds." She nodded, not pressing further, though her curiosity burned. Instead, she moved to her father's side, stroking his clammy forehead. Slowly, color returned to his cheeks, and his breathing evened out. Exhaustion crashed over her like a sudden wave, and her burned arm throbbed under the bandages. She sank onto a small stool, letting her head fall into her hands. Perhaps for the first time in days, she felt safe enough to rest. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Logan was draping a thermal blanket over her shoulders. "There's a bunk through that door," he murmured softly. "It's small, but better than the sleeping bag on the stool." She blinked up at him, noticing the kindness in his eyes. "What about you?" "I'll be fine. My bunk is in the cockpit area. Go sleep." She hesitated a moment, then rose unsteadily and made her way to the indicated room. Her head spun with unanswered questions, but her body demanded rest. As she lay down on the narrow bunk, she thought of the guard's savage grin, the conduction lance, and Logan's timely intervention. The swirl of events felt surreal. Before she drifted off, a single thought flitted across her mind. How ironic that an off-world stranger showed her more mercy than anyone on Jovara had in years. Author's note on approximate word count so far. We're at roughly 3,000 words. The story continues, deepening the conflicts and introducing the legendary Icefinder father, the oppressive Baron Gelthus, and the background of Logan as Icebreaker, or an equivalent, who has a plan to free Jovara. The next chapters will expand on these plot points, culminating in an approx. 8,000-word narrative. Orxia woke to the faint hum of the ship's engines in standby mode. The bunk's overhead light glowed softly, indicating a pseudo-morning on board. She stretched, wincing as her muscles protested. The numbness in her burned arm was both relief and worry. At least it wasn't throbbing now. Pulling on a spare thermal jacket she found hanging on a peg, she ventured out into the corridor. Voices reached her ears, Logan's low murmur, followed by her father's raspy tone. She hurried to the medbay. Inside, her father was propped up against a raised cot, an oxygen cannula attached to his nose. Though he looked frail, he was awake and speaking. Logan stood next to him, arms folded, listening intently. "The stone layers are too thick," her father was saying. "You'd need specialized drills or enough geothermal power to melt it from beneath." Logan nodded thoughtfully. "I might have a lead on that, but we need solid proof that there's an aquifer network deep below the surface. People have rumored about hidden oceans under Jovara for years. Her father attempted a chuckle but broke into a coughing fit. Orxia rushed to his side, steadying him. "Father, you shouldn't strain yourself." He waved her concern away once he recovered. "Orxia, my dear, meet our new friend properly. He's been telling me quite the tale about a movement off-world." She looked between them, brow furrowed. "Movement?" Logan exhaled, leaning against a console. "I'm part of a loose coalition dedicated to freeing vital resources, like water, energy, certain medical supplies, on planets suffering under monopolies. I've been monitoring Jovara for some time. The rumors of an under-ice ocean or advanced technology left behind by an ancient civilization, they drew me here. If we can prove such a resource exists and harness it, it'd break Gelthus's stranglehold. The people wouldn't have to pay him for rationed water anymore." Her father nodded, eyes bright with memory. "I used to be an ice finder, Orxia. That's how I met your mother. She was from the southern polar region, where the rumor of an endless melt originated. We spent years searching for pockets of warm springs or unique minerals that might lead to a reservoir. But it wasn't until your mother died." He trailed off, pain etching his features. Orxia pressed his hand gently. "Father, you never told me any of this." He sighed. "After she passed, I lost the will to keep searching. I fell ill. I didn't want to drag you into more danger. But the map Logan showed me." Logan stepped forward, activating a small holo projector that displayed Jovara's topography. "Your father recognized some markers that might indicate a geothermal rift. If we can exploit that rift, we could theoretically melt a passage into a subterranean ocean." Orxia stared at the floating hologram. "And the Baron? He'd never let us just do that. That's why we have to act quietly, or with enough leverage that Gelthus can't stop us." Her father coughed again, but managed a rueful smile. "The biggest leverage is proof. If the people see a newly tapped reservoir, Gelthus will lose support. Even his enforcers might turn on him in exchange for guaranteed access to water." A swirl of emotions coursed through Orxia, shock at the scope of Logan's plan, sadness that her father had kept secrets, and a glimmer of hope. "So, if this works, no one would have to lose a limb for stealing water again." Logan met her eyes, and she noticed the warmth in his gaze. "Exactly," she swallowed. "I'm in, whatever it takes. For my father, for all of Greyhold, for Jovara." A subtle light of admiration flickered on Logan's face. He nodded. "We'll need to prepare carefully. We have to scout the location your father identified. But that area is rumored to be crawling with Gelthus's best-equipped forces." Orxia brushed a lock of her father's thin hair from his forehead, her voice quiet. "We just have to be faster than them." Their plans might have gone smoothly had the Baron not been so efficient in dispatching enforcers across Jovara's scattered settlements. Word traveled that a brazen theft, one that ended with a guard beaten unconscious, had occurred, and the culprit had fled with an offworlder. The next day, a roving patrol discovered Greyhold deserted, except for rumors of how Orxia and her father had vanished in the night. Concerned neighbors gave vague answers, enough to raise suspicion. Baron Gelthus himself was not a Jovaran by birth. He was rumored to hail from a wealthy planet Corward, where he'd learned the art of resource monopolization. Tall and gaunt, he wore coats lined with the fur of exotic creatures from warmer worlds. In his private domain, a sprawling fortress known as the Cryovault, he dined on delicacies from across the galaxy, accompanied by meticulously filtered water and heated wine. When a squad captain reported the identity of the thief, a girl whose father had once been an ice finder, the Baron's keen interest was piqued. He summoned the squad captain to his private office, a grand chamber set with tall windows of reinforced glass that looked out onto the shimmering ice. "Ice finder, you say," Gelthus mused, sipping from a crystal goblet. "I've heard that term. The local superstitions about individuals who can sense water beneath the ice. I always assumed it was nonsense." The squad captain stiffened, helmet in hand. "Yes, my lord, but the father had some local reputation. They say he'd discovered hidden pockets, but never anything that threatened your domain." Gelthus's thin lips curled. "Until now, apparently. This father-daughter duo vanish, and an off-worlder is with them. They assaulted my guard, stole my water." His voice turned cold. "Find them." The captain bowed. "We suspect they may have left Greyhold entirely. Possibly they have assistance, some smuggler or pilot." Geltus's eyes glittered with cunning. Off-worlders often have ships. They might try to exploit certain topographical regions, like the rumored geothermal vents. He paused, swirling the liquid in his goblet. Deploy watchers to the southern ridges, near the old rift. If there's anything worth discovering, that's where they'll go. Yes, my lord, the captain said, saluting. As the captain hurried out, Geltus allowed himself a small, predatory smile. Rumors of a hidden ocean beneath Jovara's crust had circulated for decades. If such a reservoir truly existed, capturing it first would solidify his absolute hold on the moon. Alternatively, if the thieves, especially this ice finder father, dared to approach it, Geltus would be there to seize or destroy them. Either outcome would suit him. Oblivious to the immediate extent of Geltus's mobilization, Logan, Orxia, and her father worked on refining the Sundancer's scanning equipment. Each modification brought them a step closer to pinpointing the rift's exact location. They needed to confirm the presence of a subterranean ocean, or at least a large aquifer beneath the ice. Once her father was stable enough for travel, Orxia helped him to the cockpit to show him the instrumentation. Father, do you recognize these patterns? She pointed to a band of geological lines on the display. He squinted. Yes, these bands indicate potential warm pockets. We might see a meltdown channel if we bring the ship in for a closer look. Logan nodded, strapping into the pilot seat. Then that's our next step. We'll fly under the radar, low altitude, keep the thrusters minimal, and scope out the site. But keep in mind, if Geltus's enforcers are there, we'll have limited maneuverability. Orxia exhaled. We don't have much choice. As they powered up the engines, the Sundancer lifted from its hiding spot with a rumble, throwing up swirling plumes of snow. The sun's faint rays glinted off the hull. Logan guided them toward the southern hemisphere. Soon they were crossing a landscape of towering blue-white ice spires, glacial crevasses, and valleys shaped by millennia of slow glacial shifts. Inside the ship, tension ran high. Her father pressed a hand to the window, gazing out at the sweeping vistas. Your mother and I once traveled this route by crawler, he said softly. Took us weeks. Now here we are in hours. Orxia touched his shoulder gently. We'll finish what you both started. Logan signaled the autopilot to maintain a course at low altitude. We're approaching the rift's coordinates. Outside, the terrain gave way to a sudden drop, a chasm that seemed to cut deep into Jovara's ice crust. Steam or fog hovered at the edges, indicating geothermal activity. The rift was about 4 kilometers wide, with a bottom lost to swirling mist. Logan eased the Sundancer into a hover near the rift's upper lip. Sensor arrays pinged with faint readings of subterranean water. The display mapped out possible tunnel structures, though clarity was low. It's definitely warmer down there, said Orxia's father, analyzing the data. I'm seeing signs of an underground heated reservoir. Orxia's pulse quickened. Then the rumors were true. Logan nodded. We have to get a ground team in there. The ship can't descend safely. It's too narrow for stable flight if the wind picks up. We'll land on that ledge. They set down on a relatively flat stretch of ice near the rift. The wind whipped across the hull, sending ghostly howls through the air. Stepping onto the ground was an exercise in caution. One misstep could send them sliding into the darkness below. Logan led the way, conduction lance strapped across his back, a coil of grappling cable at his belt. Orxia supported her father. Should you really be out here, father? She asked, concerned for his condition. He smiled grimly. I won't sit idle while you risk your life. They inched closer to the chasm's edge, peering into the gloom. Vents of steam hissed from cracks in the ice, forming swirling clouds that glowed faintly in the sunlight. Orxia swallowed. What's the plan? We rappel down? Logan hammered a stake into the ground, attaching the cable. We can't rely on thrusters alone. The electromagnetic interference down there could scramble a short hover. Better to do it manually. I'll go first, test the route. Her father began to protest, but Orxia stopped him with a firm glance. He's right. Let him check. Logan tested his harness, gave them a salute, and slipped over the edge. The cable unspooled, carrying him into the fog. Orxia and her father waited, hearts pounding. Minutes later, a crackling voice sounded over Logan's comm. About 80 meters down, I see a ledge and an opening in the ice wall. Temperatures are significantly higher. This might be our entry. Orxia exhaled. We're coming. They followed carefully. Orxia guiding her father's descent while he gripped a second cable line. The swirl of steam and the faint hiss of geothermal vents created an eerie ambiance. At last, they reached the ledge. Logan stood there, scanning the ice with a handheld device. "Check this," he said softly, handing the device to Orxia. She squinted at the readout, presence of liquid water within 50 meters, possibly less. The temperature read a few degrees above freezing, practically tropical by Jovaran standards. She shot a look at her father, seeing cautious excitement in his eyes. The entrance to what seemed like a tunnel gaped to their left, carved by nature or something else, over centuries of thermal flows. They edged inside, the walls glistening with frost and trickles of meltwater. "Come look," Logan whispered, shining a flashlight down a corridor of ice. Condensation rose from small pools on the floor. The sound of dripping water echoed. Orxia's breath caught in awe. It was the first time she had seen actual water flow outside of a controlled environment. Yes, it was small and frigid, but it was there. Her father leaned on her for support, tears in his eyes. "Your mother would have loved to see this." Logan moved ahead, scanning each step. "If these tunnels lead us to a larger reservoir, we'll have all the proof we need." Yet a knot of unease formed in Orxia's gut. This place felt too open, too accessible. And what if Geltis had guessed their plan? They had only traveled a few hundred meters into the tunnels when a thunderous boom echoed through the ice. The ground shook. Chunks of frost rained down. Orxia instinctively threw up her hands to shield her face. Logan cursed under his breath, steadying himself. "What was that?" Her father coughed, wincing. "It came from above." Another rumble, more localized, rattled the tunnel. A volley of bright energy beams lanced through the ceiling, sending sprays of melting ice. Orxia and her father scrambled for cover behind a jutting ridge of ice. Logan did the same. Shadows loomed overhead as shapes repelled down the hole created by the blasts. Through the swirling steam, Orxia caught sight of dark uniforms. The HFY Geltis's enforcers. They had conduction lances, possibly more advanced. A commanding voice bellowed, "Spread out! Secure the perimeter!" Logan shot Orxia a tense look. "They found us faster than I expected. Must have been tracking us from the start." Her father breathed heavily, as if each word cost him great effort. "They'll kill us. Or worse, capture us to force me to reveal everything." Logan gritted his teeth. "We can't let that happen." He grabbed Orxia's arm. "Take your father deeper into the tunnel. I'll draw them off." She shook her head fiercely. "No, you can't fight them alone. Let us help." He cut her off. "Your father's in no condition for a firefight. And no offense, but I have more experience with these situations. Go. Find that reservoir. Show Jovara there's hope. I'll buy you time." Her father, trembling but resolute, tugged Orxia away. "He's right. You must carry on, child." She glared at Logan. "Don't you die on me, human. I owe you too much for that." Logan gave a wry grin. "I'll do my best." Clutching her father's arm, Orxia led him deeper into the tunnel. Behind them, she heard the whine of energy weapons and Logan's answering volley of shots from a conduction lance. The screams of Geltis's enforcers punctuated the hiss of steam. Each echo sent adrenaline rushing through her veins. The tunnel sloped downward, weaving through spires of ancient ice. The temperature continued to climb, making her sweat inside her thermal suit. Her father stumbled, eyes hazy from exhaustion, but she supported him. Then abruptly, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber lit by a soft, otherworldly glow. The ice underfoot gave way to stone, coated in slick layers. In the center of that chamber lay a body of water, a lake that shimmered like liquid blue crystal. Orxia sucked in a breath. It was no mere puddle or small flow. This was a genuine underground lake, the fabled ocean they had hoped for. Steam rose off its surface, suggesting geothermal vents. She could scarcely believe the scale, stretching far into darkness. Her father's voice quivered with wonder. "We found it. After all these years. It's real." In that moment, tears sprang to Orxia's eyes, remembering her mother, the hardships, the cruelty. If we can show the people, they'll realize there's enough for everyone. Geltis can't hoard or ration this. She hurried to the water's edge, kneeling to examine it. Warmth radiated from the liquid. She dipped her glove. The water was real, fresh, and abundant. Joy swelled in her chest. This was the key to Jovara's liberation. Suddenly, her father let out a small cry, collapsing against a rock. She rushed to him, alarmed. "Father!" He clutched his chest, breathing raggedly. "I'm fine," he whispered, though clearly he was not. "Just need a moment." Orxia felt panic rising. If he deteriorated now, she had no means to carry him all the way back or defend him if the enforcers arrived. Crack! A muffled explosion came from the tunnel behind them. Dust and ice chips rained down. She stood, heart pounding, scanning the darkness. Out of the swirling haze emerged a figure. Tall, masked by a rebreather, carrying an ornate conduction lance. For a fleeting second, Orxia hoped it was Logan. But as the figure stepped into the glow of the subterranean lake, she recognized the fine fur-lined coat, the glint of cunning eyes. Baron Geltis. Behind him, a half-dozen enforcers fanned out in a semicircle, weapons raised. They looked battered, some sporting injuries, but they still had the advantage. Geltis stared at the lake with predatory amazement. "So it's true," he murmured, stepping closer, ignoring Orxia's father, who lay helpless. "A geothermal reservoir large enough to supply all of Jovara, and you led me right to it." Orxia clenched her fists. "It was never yours to own." Geltis smirked. "Nonsense. Power belongs to those bold enough to claim it." He gestured with his lance. "Though I should thank you. Once I have complete control of this resource, my dominion is absolute." Her anger flared. "People are dying in your settlements. You cut off water, punish them with savage laws. And now you want to do it again? Just on a larger scale?" He shrugged. "Survival of the fittest? Or wealthiest? It's the same across the galaxy, child." His enforcers advanced. Orxia positioned herself protectively in front of her father. "Stay back," Geltis scoffed. "You can't seriously intend to fight all of us, and your father is in no condition to run." She glanced around desperately. The lake's shore offered no immediate cover. The tunnel behind was blocked by the skirmish or collapsed from blasts. Her father's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. There seemed no way out. Then unexpectedly, footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind Geltis's group. They whirled, weapons raised. In strode Logan, breathing hard, flecks of blood staining his jacket sleeve. A few paces behind him lay the unconscious forms of more enforcers. His conduction lance crackled with residual energy. "At last," Logan said, voice grim. "I was wondering where the big fish had gone." Geltis eyed him with distaste. "You must be the off-world troublemaker." Logan hefted the lance. "And you must be the one who'd happily see a girl's hand cut off for a single flask of water." The Baron's guards brandished their weapons, but Geltis lifted a hand. "Easy. No point in further bloodshed. The outcome is already determined." Orxia rushed to Logan's side, relief surging. "You're hurt," she whispered, seeing the blood on his arm. He gave her a lopsided grin. "Nothing major. Good to see you're both alive. So that's the reservoir?" She nodded. "And Geltis wants it for himself." At that, Logan squared his shoulders, pointing the tip of the lance at Geltis. "You can't have it. Not anymore." Geltis's laughter echoed among the ice walls. "Look around you. You're outnumbered, outgunned." He gestured to the half-dozen armed enforcers, plus the possibility of more behind them. "And the father is on the brink of death. You want to fight us with one hand tied behind your back?" Logan's stance remained firm, but Orxia saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. They were clearly at a disadvantage. Her father stirred, coughing violently, forcing himself to speak. "Wait, wait, I can help." His voice, though frail, carried a desperate edge. "This reservoir isn't just water. It's connected to something bigger, deeper." Geltis frowned. "Speak plainly, old man." Gasping, the father pointed to the pool. "It's not a closed reservoir. If my readings are correct, there's an entire chain of connected channels crisscrossing Jovara, possibly beyond." Logan's eyes narrowed. "You think it leads to other subterranean oceans?" Her father nodded, then hacked a fit of coughing. "Yes, the melt lines. If we open this up, it's unstoppable. Baron, you wouldn't be able to contain it if we release the pressure. It might flood half the moon, or at least saturate the entire crust. Water would be everywhere." A hush fell on the chamber. Orxia realized the enormous potential and threat implicit in her father's words. If they triggered a meltdown at the heart of the geothermal vents, it could break the ice's stranglehold. Water would become widespread across Jovara's surface, forever eliminating Gelthus's monopoly. Gelthus's gaze flickered with sudden fear. "You're bluffing." The older man mustered a weak grin. "You're welcome to test that theory, or you can step aside." For a moment, tension hung like a knife's edge. Then Gelthus snarled, refusing to lose face. "I'll kill you now and control the meltdown myself." Before he could act, the ground shook violently. A distant rumble reverberated through the tunnels. Steam hissed from cracks. The reservoir itself rippled with an ominous surge of heat, as if responding to an unseen stirring in the planet's depths. Gelthus glanced around uneasily. "What in the void?" Logan risked a step forward. "You can't control this. It's bigger than you." Two enforcers rushed in, raising conduction lances at Logan. He sidestepped, parried with his own lance. The clash sparked bright arcs of plasma-like energy. Orxia ducked as a stray bolt whizzed past, scorching the ice. The entire chamber erupted into chaos. Gelthus aimed his lance at Orxia's father. She cried out, throwing herself in front of him. But Logan vaulted across the slippery ground and tackled Gelthus, sending them both sliding toward the water's edge. The enforcers closed in. Orxia seized a fallen baton, igniting its hot coil. She swung it in a defensive arc, forcing two attackers to reconsider. Meanwhile, her father feebly crawled behind a chunk of ice. One of the enforcers lunged, trying to reach the father. Orxia thrust the baton forward, crackling electricity surging. She had never truly fought this way, but desperation fueled her. The enforcer recoiled with a snarl. Meanwhile, Logan wrestled with Gelthus on the slick shoreline. They grappled for control of the conduction lance, their breath ragged. Steam rose all around them, the water roiling as if the moon itself raged. At last, Gelthus tore the lance free, aiming the tip at Logan's chest. "You meddling fool," he spat, triumph flooding his features. Logan braced himself, eyes locked on the lethal energy. Then a swirl of movement behind Gelthus caught his eye. Orxia's father, with the last of his strength, had crawled up and latched onto Gelthus's ankle, yanking with trembling arms. Gelthus stumbled, losing aim. Logan seized the opportunity, slamming an elbow into Gelthus's chin, knocking him backward. The Baron slipped on the wet ice, toppling onto his side. Sensing their leader in peril, the enforcers hesitated. Some turned to aid him, others faced Orxia and Logan. But the rising quake in the chamber grew fierce, and cracks raced along the walls, letting torrents of near-boiling water seep in. Logan scrambled to his feet, panting, retrieving his conduction lance. "We have to get out. This place is going to flood." Orxia rushed to her father, trying to support his weight. The old man gasped. "No, let it flood. Release the water to the surface. End the Baron's grip forever." A complicated swirl of emotions crossed her face. She looked at Logan. "If we do that, we risk destroying entire settlements that aren't prepared. People could die." Logan glanced at the violently churning reservoir, steam rising in clouds. "We need a controlled release, or at least some advance warning to the settlements." Baron Gelthus staggered up, eyes wild with fury. "You'll do no such thing." Before he could lunge again, the largest quake yet buckled the ground. The ice floor cracked in a massive fissure, and a roar of surging water echoed as part of the lake began draining into lower caverns. Torrents of steam enveloped them all. Gelthus and a few enforcers lost their footing, tumbling toward a deep crevasse. Logan yelled at Orxia, "Go, take your father." She pulled him with all her might, stumbling away from the collapsing shoreline. Behind them, screams sounded as the enforcers tried to scramble to safety. Gelthus himself hung precariously on a jut of ice, conduction lance lost to the water. For a moment, Orxia almost felt pity for him, but she remembered the cruelty, the severed hands, the extortion. She had no illusions he'd show mercy if their positions were reversed. She heard Logan's voice. "This way!" With her father, they retreated up a tunnel that led to a side passage, one the sensors had flagged as a potential exit. Water began gushing behind them. The entire chamber threatened to become a maelstrom of liquefied ice. They didn't stop running until they heard the roar of water fade behind them. The side passage angled upward, eventually leading to a jagged opening near the surface. They emerged into the dull daylight of Jovara, blinking at the swirl of snow. Orxia helped her father ease onto a patch of stable ice, then collapsed next to him, gasping for breath. Logan slumped against a boulder, cradling his wounded arm. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage. In the distance, a low rumble emanated from underground. Plumes of steam and ice shards occasionally erupted from vents. The meltdown was underway, perhaps unstoppable. But whether it would release water across Jovara or remain contained in the southern region, only time would tell. Her father's eyes fluttered closed. Orxia felt panic. "No, stay with me, father. We're so close. We can get you to the Sundancer. Find medical help." Logan forced himself up. "We have to reach the ship. I can signal the coalition. They have more advanced medtech." "Yes, do it," Orxia said, tears in her eyes. Supporting her father between them, they trudged away from the rift's chaos. Eventually, after what felt like hours, they found the small canyon where the Sundancer was parked. Ice cracks and trembling ground made the journey perilous, but they pushed on with sheer determination. Finally, the ramp lowered, and they stumbled inside. Logan rushed to the cockpit to initiate warm-up sequences, while Orxia guided her father back to the medbay. He was barely conscious, each breath labored. She clasped his hand. "Don't you dare give up now. You made this happen. Jovara will be free because of you." His eyes opened a sliver. "Because of us, child. You, me, Logan, we did it together." A pang of emotion pierced her heart. She reached up to a comm panel. "Logan, we're ready," he replied, voice crackling. "We'll be airborne in 60 seconds. Hold tight." Outside, they heard the thrusters spool up. The ship shuddered, lifting from the ice. Orxia felt the relief of leaving the unstable ground behind, but an undercurrent of sorrow for all those still out there, uncertain what the meltdown would bring. She refused to let fear overshadow hope. Already, the meltdown had proved the existence of vast water resources. Rumors would spread like wildfire among the settlements, forging unity and defiance. The people would question Gelthus's iron grip. As the Sundancer ascended, Logan activated a wideband transmitter. "This is Logan Brandt calling any coalition vessels in the sector. We have an urgent medical case and critical data on a newly discovered aquifer system. Requesting immediate assistance." Static answered for a moment, then a distant voice crackled in response. "Copy, Sundancer. Coalition frigate Aurora Dawn is in range, preparing to receive your coordinates." Orxia managed a trembling smile. They weren't alone in the galaxy's night after all. Weeks passed in a blur. The Coalition's frigate arrived, bringing advanced medical facilities that saved Orxia's father from the brink. While he remained weak, his eyes shone with renewed determination. Logan's injuries mended quickly under their care. News of a large-scale meltdown in the southern hemisphere spread. Water steamed through cracks in the ice, forming new rivers and lakes that shimmered under Jovara's dim sun. Settlements flocked to those regions, forging alliances to harness this unleashed resource responsibly. Baron Gelthus's reign crumbled. Some said he died in the flooding caverns. Others claimed he escaped, only to be hunted by survivors of his enforcers. Regardless, his stranglehold was undone. For once, hope flourished across Jovara. One crisp morning, Orxia and Logan stood outside the Coalition's temporary base, gazing across the newborn lake near the rift. The air smelled cleaner, less oppressive. Ice glistened with rivulets of fresh water. "Hard to believe," Orxia murmured. "A few weeks ago, losing a hand for water theft was normal. Now there's enough for everyone." Logan smiled softly. "That's the power of knowledge and action. Your father's courage, your determination." She turned to him, eyes shining. "What happens next? Will the Coalition stay?" He shrugged. "They'll likely establish a transitional authority, ensure no new tyranny takes hold. Over time, Jovara might join the coalition of free worlds. I'll probably move on to the next planet in need." Her heart clenched at the thought of him leaving. "So soon?" He slipped an arm around her waist. "There's always another place that needs help. But I plan to return. Often." Behind them, her father walked up, leaning on a cane. Though still frail, he carried an air of peace. "Orxia, my child, you should go see what else the galaxy has to offer. You're an ice finder now. Imagine what good you could do. And we have the resources to rebuild Jovara without you fretting at my side." She felt torn, but also excited by the prospect of adventure. It would be hard to leave you alone. He smiled. I've got the coalition. I'll manage just fine. The wind gusted, carrying the scent of new beginnings. Orxia gazed at Logan, remembering the moment he stepped in to save her from losing a limb over a stolen flask. A chance encounter that had set in motion a cascade of events, culminating in the liberation of an entire moon. Perhaps it was fate, or just courage and compassion at the right time. In the distance, a spaceship soared across the pale sky, scouting newly formed lakes. Children from Greyhole's settlement laughed as they gathered water in buckets, no longer terrified of punitive laws. The ice of Jovara was thawing, both literally and figuratively. Orxia took Logan's hand, lacing her fingers with his. He squeezed back gently. Together they watched the horizon, where the faint glow of the gas giant cast an aurora-like shimmer over the freshly exposed waters. A thaw had begun, not only in Jovara's frozen plains, but in the hearts of its people. And from that thaw, a future of possibility beckoned. Thank you so much for stopping by and being part of this storytelling journey. If you're as eager as we are to find out exactly how the meltdown reshapes the fate of Jovara, and whether our protagonists truly triumph over tyranny, then be sure to listen to the entire story from beginning to end. Trust us, the build-up to that final confrontation is worth every minute. We'd love to hear your feedback. Which characters captivated you the most? And what do you think might happen if a hidden reservoir were discovered on your own world? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section, because your voice is what makes our community stronger. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and stay connected for more thrilling sci-fi adventures, emotional twists, and heroic journeys unlike any you've heard before.